Well, the World Economic Forum sets a global agenda for the conversations that take place here regarding what they see as the biggest challenges. But often the most important meetings are the unintended ones, or the private conversations that are had on the sidelines of this conference. So what's the buzz? Joining me now is Anthony Scaramucci. He's founder and managing partner at SkyBridge Capital.
SkyBridge Capital, yes.
I want to ask you, you've been going to the parties, you've been in these sessions. What is it that's really dominating conversation?
Yeah, look, there's a tremendous fear. The Volcker ruling right now seems to have the biggest impact in terms of the conversations. I know there's a lot of concern in the private equity world where people are feeling that it'll make the banks more restrictive at a time where we need to get the banks to loosen up. But I think that the biggest thing that's going on in Davos right now is policy clarity. Are we going to get policy clarity not only from the U.S. government but from the G20? And one of the big concerns about the Volcker Rule is that it's perhaps unlikely that all G20 nations will subscribe to it. If they don't, well, then you'll see a migration of banks to the countries that are going to be more lax on the regulatory side. So this is some big uncertainty in the world right now. And I think coming off of 2009, where the U.S. has had great uncertainty in terms of health care reform, taxation policy, and things like that. So we need more predictability in policy, I think, going forward.
Right. It sounds like what you're describing, though, is almost the private sector frustrated with the bureaucracy of the public, right? That the political process and the proposed legislation, Volcker Rule, it's very nebulous. We don't have the terms of what it would mean yet. It has to go through Congress. It's going to be rewritten. It's going to get further detail. But there's such a need here to have terms defined more quickly.
Yes, exactly.
And the conversations to be had by central bankers, not just the politicians.
Well, and I also think the message really is let's not fight last year's war. Let's look to the future and let's figure out how we're going to regulate things in a way that will clear things up. You know, Bob Diamond in private conversations talking about the size of banks may not necessarily be the reason why we had the problem. Right. It could be related to leverage ratios, risk-taking, and things like that. And perhaps you don't want to lose the economy of scale that you have in these banks.
And that theme of what you just said there has come up in so many conversations. The concern among investors that I hear is about the need to focus on leverage and leverage ratios, not the size of the institutions themselves.
Right. I think that would be probably the most propitious and smartest thing to do. And I think that they will eventually get there. But here's the problem right now. The steps from getting to that point are 12, 18 months away, perhaps even 2 years away. And I think people are getting some policy fatigue. If I could characterize it as global policy fatigue, that's sort of what it is. Too much uncertainty. We need greater clarity and a little bit more simplicity from the governments.
When you go
I think
out,
that's the overriding message.
When you go out and you talk to potential investors, when you talk about raising capital, and I mean, what's the environment like? Is that apprehension affecting investors too?
I think everybody would say that they've had a more difficult time raising capital because anytime you have uncertainty and fear involved in a situation, it causes people to pull back. And again, with greater clarity, you get more certainty, you get more confidence back in the system, and then you'll see capital turn the crank a little bit. In the governor's meeting, there were 12 sovereign wealth funds. Everyone is banging on their door looking for capital. They don't want to be the suckers in this game. They do have the capital.
So many of them got burned with the financial crisis.
They got burned in the financial crisis. They don't want to be the suckers. They clearly have capital. They clearly want to put that capital to work. So it's going to be a combination of public sector predictability and private sector temperance, I think, will hopefully get us back to where we all would like to be.
Lastly, can you characterize the environment for me? Because I keep hearing that this place, the tone is more optimistic than last year. This is your third year here. Would you say optimistic is the right word to describe it?
It felt like the Earth was going to spin off its axis. So this year, it seems like it's still rotating the Earth. But I still feel a pessimism in the air here, great uncertainty. At the Australian dinner on Wednesday night, or actually it was Tuesday night, one of the guys made a comment that the general consensus in Davos is usually wrong. So if that's the case...
If we're hearing optimism, that's actually not the case.
Well, I actually think we're hearing more pessimism in the hallways of the Congress Center. So if that's the case, it probably bodes well for the year, because last year we were coming off the axis.
Right.
And we went up 60% in the equity markets.
Thank you so much, Anthony Scaramucci, SkyBridge Capital.